or that you sent out to our staff, Trevor, certainly about what life has been like for you and the support that Kathy's given. So thanks for doing that, and thanks, Kath, for the continued work that you're doing with us. Anyone else? Go ahead.
I just want to add one more thing. Dugald School was working with an artist in the school to create a mural with the students. I had a chance to see it at Parent Teacher, and it is phenomenal. It's my understanding that it'll be going on the outside of the school when it's all said and done.
Thank you. Okay, hearing no other shares of stories, we're going to move on to, we have a delegation, and Trevor, I'm going to turn it over to you. Well, they've already been introduced by you, Paul, but we would like to welcome Mr. Stanley and his team from Enola, who are going to be sharing about their school with us. So.
Thank you very much. That opening went by a whole lot quicker than I was thinking it was going to. I would like to introduce to my far right Sarah Westall. Sarah is one of our resource teachers, and her main responsibility at Enola School is to work with, program for, and to deliver that programming to all of our special needs students, and specifically nonverbal students, difficulty communicating. Robin Turner is one of our other, to my direct right, Robin Turner is one of our other student services people who, her main responsibility, she has two main ones. Afternoon, she's been doing reading recovery, which is coming to an end soon. And in the mornings, Robin works with literacy support, academic support for K-3 students. And I had two other people scheduled to be here this evening, Amanda Dent and Corey Smith, but unfortunately family issues have popped up and they were unable to attend. But I do have a write-up from them that I will read when it comes to their part. Corey and Amanda do the grades 4 to 8 student services, and that is their main responsibility. So what we do is we know that all of the teachers are doing a good job with the mainstream students in the classroom. We know that literacy instruction is happening. We know the progress being made from the running records and from the data that has been collected. What we're going to talk about this evening for a little bit is our focus on how the student services team is working with those groups of students who have more difficulties with their learning, and how they work with those students on pressing home and working with the literacy interventions. And once again, our goal this year is that every student will increase their reading levels as evidenced by the division of the Sunrise Divisional Toolkit. So what we're going to do is, Mr. Reed, if you could click the next slide, please. The demographics, these are the current demographics for Enola School. I just wanted to have those up there so you kind of had a snapshot. Most of the classes are blended, and we have done that purposefully. I keep the numbers lower. If we did not have them blended, we would have 33 in grade 8 right now. So that's a very conscious decision. Next slide, please, Mr. Reed. Here's our goal. Students will grow as readers as evidenced by the divisional assessment tools. That is what we submitted last year, and we know I did not bring evidence for this part because we're focusing on something else for the presentation today. Next slide, please, sir. We know that the regular instruction happens. Regular classroom, we have the teachers in the classrooms, we have the educational assistants. I can't speak enough about the educational assistants, the job that they do. It's just absolutely fantastic as well. And then we have the student services team who works with the students in the classroom. Mr. Reed, please. I put together a word cloud here. These are a lot of the words that you would find in our current school goals. Products, observations, conversation, social awareness, technology, literacy, PD, all of those things are strategies and things that we wanted to accomplish this year in our literacy goal. I could have put up a copy of our school goals, but this is much more concise. And we're going to talk here specifically about some technology and strengths of people. Next slide, please. So I've already done the introductions. We have K-3 Robin Turner. We have Sarah Westall, Literacy Intervention for Students with Special Needs, and Amanda Denton, Corey Smith, grades 4 to 8 Student Services. Next slide, please, sir. Robin, sorry, Ms. Turner, all yours.
I work primarily with K-3, so from September until March, I've been mostly supporting with Jan Richardson. The Jan Richardson model of guided reading is used in all of our early years classrooms. And so by supporting the classes, I can help ensure that the groups get seen more often. So it's a small group intervention, and classrooms may have 5 groups. So to help make sure those groups can rotate through a teacher more quickly and have that direct instruction more often, I help in that way. I've also been supplementing with Rhyme Magic, which is a word-based, like a word recognition program, and using elements of UFly Foundations for phonics instruction. And on March 7th, I was trained in the UFly Foundations. UFly stands for University of Florida Literacy Institute, and their program focuses on phonics instruction and phonemic awareness. So phonics being the sounds and the letters that correspond together, phonemic awareness being able to manipulate those sounds, blend them or delete them or change them, and use them in different ways. So I've only just got started with groups doing that, but the groups that I'm working with, I've transitioned to that, just to have something that's a little more complementary to what they're doing in the classroom, and hopefully will support them in their guided reading groups. The UFly Foundations has quite a long, about 10 to 12 getting started lessons, so that's what we've been doing for the past while with all of my early years groups.
Thank you. Next slide, please, Mr. Reed. Literacy interventions for high need students, Mrs. Westall. Oh. There you go.
All right, so my literacy intervention with my students really does depend a great deal on the students' level of development, their interests, and their level of engagement. For my non-speaking students, we do research projects, and we try to find topics that are of interest to them. So we use Pictello on their talkers, which Pictello is an app, a storytelling app, on their iPads, and I've had the students research themselves, Halloween. I've got one who's currently researching chocolate. And that might just involve selecting visuals and where they place them on a poster board, or specific images, or the information that they want and where it goes. And then I have them present it to their peers, which it gets them in the classroom, it gets them interacting with others and showing that they're doing the same work that their friends are doing. And there's a lot of pride in that for my higher needs students. We do novel studies with embedded core words. For example, The Very Hungry Caterpillar. Core words are words that we pick based on their high frequency within the novel and their high frequency within our day-to-day conversation. So with The Very Hungry Caterpillar, the words very, on, he, and ate are super high. They're on almost every page. So we have the students finding them on their talker, and if we're reading the story, they hit very when we come to very in the story, ate when we come to ate, he when we come to he. I put them up on the wall so they could find them on the wall later on. Also with our novel studies, we do fine motor activities like craft sheets, coloring, Velcro books with the one-to-one matching, sorting of items like all the butterflies together, the caterpillars together, that sort of thing. For listening and viewing, Mr. Tanley has read a number of books that we use with the green screen behind him, so I can have my students watch that video whenever they want, whether it's at school or at home, which is really neat because, again, they've got their talker with them at home. They're watching The Very Hungry Caterpillar, and they can follow along and show their parents and their siblings, which I find very, very cool. And then with the gross motor, we act out the stories the best we can. I hit Value Village and look for costumes. I've got kids of my own, so I'm forever raiding their closets and their tickle trunks for things. If you want to go to the next slide, I've got a few pictures up there.
The first one, she's got the poster board. That student is non-speaking, but she did her presentation on the great white shark, much to my displeasure. She really enjoyed that. So she got to pick which images she wanted and what information she wanted to put on it. And then she added highlight and color, numbered them, how she wanted them to be presented to others. So that's her presenting to me. In the middle, she's dressed up as the beautiful butterfly at the end of the Hungry Caterpillar. And then the last image, which it's got more than one child in it, she's got her iPad, her talker there, and she's sharing her workspace with a group of peers and sharing her own personal story. That was one of the goals of her mother's, was for the student to be able to share to her peers why she's like the way she is, but about her diagnosis and what that means for her. So we had the classroom break into groups and rotate through. So 2 groups a day would come in and visit her. She'd show off her room, her activities that she likes, the posters that she's done, her pictures of her musical crush that were up on the wall, and then they got to listen to her story, and then they got to try and use her talker a little bit too. She got to show that off, which was so rewarding for her. So that's just a little bit about what I do with literacy.
Next slide, please, Mr. Reed. Now, as I mentioned, Amanda Dent and Corey Smith are not able to be here, but what they have been working with in the grades 4 to 8 is whole class teaching speech to text and text to speech, and learning accelerators and getting teacher buy-in. So I do believe that what Mr. Smith and Mrs. Dent wrote summarizes it fairly nicely. So in the grade 4 to 8 wing of Anola School, our student services team took a whole class approach to literacy interventions. Early in the school year, student services pushed into classes to teach entire classes how to use assistive technology. This allows all students the opportunity to use technology to assess their literacy skills. Students were taught how to use speech to text and text to speech in a variety of ways. For example, using Microsoft Word or using an internet search browser. Following this learning, teachers were shown how to use the Learning Accelerators feature in Teams. Student services then used Sunrise LitPlace to select grade appropriate text for students to engage in. When ready, students completed the Learning Accelerator by recording themselves reading a decoding passage. Students would sit in front of the computer in front of Teams and the camera, and there would be an appropriate age reading passage. They would read it, and they see themselves reading it, and it records it, and the teacher gets sent it, and it's awesome. Instant feedback is then given to the teacher. As seen in the next slide, students reading fluently is plotted on a chart to show their growth. So once again, it is, well, always the up arrows are always better, right? We're always trying to show the growth from September until March the 6th. That's the accuracy rate in one specific classroom, showing that there is an improvement. Teachers are also able to go back and watch the student read on the recording. After the Learning Accelerator is complete, teachers then conference with the students and use that data that has been collected to plot students on the Sunrise reading progressions. As the year has unfolded, grades 4 to 8 teachers at Anola School have used assistive technology and learning accelerators on an ongoing basis to gather the data and plan for student growth. If any trustee or anybody in the room would like to see how a learning accelerator works, please let us know. We can set one up on Teams for you and give you access to it so you can have the opportunity to go through one yourself and see what it's like. So that is all the information from Mrs. Dent and Mr. Smith. Next slide, please, Mr. Reed. That's it. That was the focus on student services and how they support literacy interventions at Anola School.
Thanks, Anthony. Are there any questions from anybody here? Trustee Nicol, and I'll get to come to you. Trustee Nicol first, and then I'll go to you.
I'm not quite sure whether you can answer it or not, because I'm asking something that you may not know. Jan Richardson, is that the same program that Dougal uses? Okay.
Trustee Smith?
Yeah, I think this is the program that we had heard about before that was we were bringing out and that was going to start getting rid of reading recovery. Is this one we heard about in the last couple of months? Is it? Anybody?
No, the Jan Richardson materials would be more of a core curriculum. We would use that with all of our students across many grades, whereas the reading recovery would be an intervention program designed to work with our neediest students at the grade 1 level.
This was it a few months ago, someone was talking about teaching their kids to use through Teams. And then, do you remember? Laura's just shaking his head. He knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I think the accelerated reader thing where the kids are reading and it records them reading, that wouldn't be, none of these things would replace reading recovery. So reading recovery was an intervention targeted at a specific set of students. These things are also very targeted. Some of the stuff they've talked about are very specific individual students sometimes, but in terms of general literacy instruction, that would not equate with it replacing reading recovery.
Right. Who brought that to our attention?
It wasn't another school presentation.
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not hungry. The girl that you were working with her presentations, you kept saying her room. Is she the only girl that uses that space?
She does operate out of a number of different spaces. I have my room, like my office space, that a number of students rotate through doing different activities, and then I have a sensory room where the same thing happens. Different kids go in with different purposes to do different activities. We just put her in charge of decorating that room. She has since moved more into my space and is decorating my space. So if you ever want to know anything about Luke Bryant, I'm the one for you. So no, she doesn't like being trapped in a specific room. She travels around the school and does different things. Does she operate with her specific classroom of peers? No. No, but she does interact with lots of other students in different areas.
Thanks, Sarah. Dustin, did you have a question? Okay. Anyone else? Sarah, I don't quite understand. I was trying to understand your role because I see that Amanda and Corey work, I guess, with groups 4 to 8, and Robin, you work with the K to 3 groups, and you work with another group, Sarah. So I don't quite understand. So can you help me out?
I have what I think is the best job in the world. I get to work with the really high needs students. I've got about 10 on my caseload, and they are the students who are affected by, greatly affected by autism or Downs, are non-speaking, have seizures that impact their development, global developmental delay. That's my basket. I get the ones that have the individual education plans that aren't following the regular curriculum. They have basically their own needs and personal curriculum that they're following outside of what the government has set up regarding reading, writing, and all that jazz. They are doing their own thing, and so I work with teachers to put together their programming, and every day is different, and every day something new and interesting happens, and I just love it. So that's me. That's what I do.
Yeah, Sarah, you explained that very well, so thank you for going ahead and doing that. You need to take your microphone off, though. Anyone else? Trustee Boyson.
Just a question. I've never heard of UFly before. And it looks like you started using it on March the 7th. Where did you find out about it, and what makes it different from Jan Richardson or anybody else?
It's It's on, I think. It's on.
Okay.
I probably heard about it for the first time last year, and it's really phonics based. So it's a scope and sequence program where you do this on day one and this on day two, and it builds. Every lesson has 30 minutes, and you're doing a bunch of different word work, blending, segmenting, writing, reading, and every day you get a new concept. So you're building on the things that they learned before, starting with just letter sounds in the beginning and moving into groups of letter sounds. So it's a K-2 program. It's got scope for each grade, but it's also intervention in that if you have a student in grade 3 who's missing pieces from grade 1, you can incorporate those pieces into their learning. So it's very, I don't want to say it's new, because I know of schools that have been using it for a few years now, but it's new to me, and I think it's starting to be introduced more widely.
What else? So one more for me, Robin and Sarah. Talk about your students will grow. Well, we all hope that students are going to grow, but how do you know? So I'm a parent coming into you, and you've talked about division assessment tools. So I'm a grade 3 student in your school, Robin, or Sarah, I'm one of your, how do you know?
Well, we would be looking at the observations and products and conversations that we've had, that we've documented from the start of the year. So really good to have the tri-folder so you can keep all of your documentation together, your conversations, your products, and your observations. And that way you've got something really concrete to talk to parents about. It's hard to notice slow growth over time, but when you have it on paper, in writing, and you can see it, then you can easily talk to parents about the progress that their child is making.
Thank you, Robin. Anyone else? Do you want anything? All right. Well, thank you, the three of you, for coming out and presenting to us. One question I probably should continue to ask, and we ask everybody. So we just went through budget, and I guess the question is, one is, did we do a good job? But the second one is, what's real important to you? With regard to budget, what's real important to you?
Thank you. Sorry. I can start off by saying that I had initially planned to start off with a thank you to the board, but I didn't want to take that time because that wasn't the function. Anola School has been, with the budget process and the staffing process that the board has just gone through, I'm very pleased with the outcome for Anola School. Anola School was given another 0.25 of a student services position. We had been, I'm not too sure, but we had one of the higher ratios of students to, like the lowest ratio, I think it is Mr. Fielberg, right? We had one of the lower ratios of, or higher ratios, tons of students, not as many supports. So that's why we got the extra 0.25 in student services staffing. With the staffing that we have, Anola School is situated to have a very good staffing year. And I just wanted to thank the board. I know there was a lot of discussions and a lot of hard conversations that were had, but for Anola School, it's a really good budget and really good staffing process that has gone through.
Thanks. All right, thank you very much then for coming out and presenting to us. We appreciate it. So on behalf of the board, as we try to get to know schools, we want to find out a little bit about what you're doing. You come back in a year or two, I'm going to ask you the question about growth. My question will be, how far have they grown? Really, I'm looking for, did we grow this much? How much did we grow as to where we are? Because we're looking for, this is just me personal, is that grow how big? Obviously I'd love to have big, but yeah. But thank you for the work that you're doing with our kids. Appreciate it. We're going to move on to our minutes. 5.1, be it resolved that the board adopt the March 19th board meeting minutes. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by trustee Dent, seconded by trustee Boytson. Any questions of the minutes? What do they do? Okay, hearing none, we'll vote. Thank you, it passed 8-0. Superintendent, so we have our superintendent's report. Mr. Reid, floor is yours.
Sorry, thank you, Paul, for the reminder about the mic. Just a couple of things to highlight on there. The second bullet down, Bill 21, is an interesting one. It comes with two pieces. The first piece is just about a change in school age, which really is not impactful. It just lowers the required school age, to align with what goes on in pretty much every other province in Canada. And that's just about making kindergarten compulsory now. In Manitoba, kindergarten was an optional program. Now it's going to become compulsory. So the overwhelming majority of our students in Sunrise are already coming to school in kindergarten, and so that's really a non-impactful change. The second part of the bill expands the definition of a resident pupil. So right now, to basically attend school in a school division in Manitoba, you have to be living with your legal guardians within the school division's catchment area or apply on a Schools of Choice program. The Bill 21 will expand that resident pupil definition to any child who's living with a responsible adult that may not be their parent or legal guardian. And what that really is intended to do is to accommodate families that may not have a traditional structure, families that may choose to have a child live with a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle out of some sort of family necessity. And it's just a more inclusive, a change. However, potentially the unintended consequence of that is to just potentially create transiency, and we don't know what the impact would be. So now, realistically, if a family desires for any reason to send their child to another school that they deem more desirable than the one in their catchment area, they just need to find a responsible adult to, for their child to live with while they go to the school. So, not saying it's going to create chaos in the system, but it is something we're going to have to keep an eye on because it does have the potential to create some transiency there. Just the other one that's worth highlighting in the superintendent's report, we have an exciting, event coming up, next week with the solar eclipse, and we all get excited because that's pretty cool, but we also need to be aware that the solar eclipse comes, with some hazards. As the light around the eclipse gets low, we're actually able to look up in the direction of the sun, and while it's not as bright, the harmful rays that come from the sun are still present. And so we have, the province did put out some communication on the eclipse. We have shared that with all of our schools. We've asked all of our schools to review that with, all of their students and make the necessary adjustments to their school day in terms of recesses and breaks based on the age of their students, as well as communicate their plans and any changes with families, so families are informed of what's going on, during the day. Certainly we want our schools to take advantage of the opportunity to do some learning, but it has to be done, safely as well.
Thanks, Mr. Reid. Anything for Mr. Reid? Trustee Boyd.
I'm just glad that you provided some clarity for the people that are out there listening, because I have had some questions about the school of choice. And people are kind of, hearing about this, that they think that they thought they could just apply to any school and they have to accept them. So, and I understood it the way you explained it, that, there has to be, you have to live at least in in that catchment area, not necessarily with your parents or, but you have to at least be in that area in order for it to. So I think there is a bit of confusion out there that people think that they can just go to any school they want now and the school has to take them. So thanks for providing that clarification.
The one other thing I should probably clarify, it's still in a bill status, so it hasn't been passed into legislation. There's no reason to think that it won't. It seems to be something that the government's clear on. It probably will be in effect. Well, they plan to have it in effect for September, and so.
Trustee Smith?
And kids, can they still apply, like if they don't live there though, like the old school of choice, is that still an option?
Yeah, we believe it is. There hasn't been any indication from the government that the Schools of Choice program is going to disappear. It will remain in place the same.
Turn it off or on? I'm good now? I had a friend that lived here, but because of the music program, came to my school in Falkirk. So that's still an option, yeah.
But remember, the receiving school doesn't necessarily have to take you. It's all based on room and that's determined by each school. Mr. Reid, can you check on, there's two things that you talked about here. One is about, you talked about transiency and now responsible of adult, and we know one of our schools is kind of has a little bit of that transiency right now. But there's also about, in the announcement that Powerview School is a community school. What does that really, there's some information there, but can you, in your best, can you explain a little bit of what that means?
Yeah, the definition of a community school, community schools are identified, by the province through a variety of demographic indicators. They'll look at census data, and they'll look at the socioeconomic status or the average salary within a region. They'll look at the number of children in care. They'll look at the number of families in a given region that qualify for social assistance. Those type of demographic indicators, and when they see an area or a school that has a variety of, risk factors in terms of kids being unsuccessful in school, they'll identify it as a community school. The two things that we know to be true is that through the new universal meal program that the province has put out, there is a very, very generous amount of, I believe that's $120,000 that's allocated to a community school through that. The second monetary item that is also of a huge benefit to the school is there is money allocated to a community support liaison. So an identified person who can be hired by the school, who can connect families with support or connect the school with families, just acts as a person who can go between community supports, families, and the school to try and support student learning. We'll also speak of the school taking on the goal of connecting with other community supports and trying to be that hub for students. But that will vary from school to school and community to community. Probably the last thing I'll add is just as a learning part, the school principal, Chrissy Visnoff, has the contact information for the community schools liaison for the province. And she has agreed to come out to the school to walk the school through all aspects of the community schools program, which I'm sure we'll have members of the senior admin team out there as well. That date is just to be determined.
And that resource is to be starting in September or right away?
No, that would be a resource starting for September.
Anyone else? Questions for Mr. Reid? Thanks. We have the draft reporting schedule. It's there for information. Is there any questions or comments on the draft reporting schedule? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on. Secretary Treasurer's report, you have the information. Did you want to add stuff, Jody?
Yeah, I won't get into too deep into a lot of things, but I just want to recognize welcome back to all the bus drivers from a spring break. as well as our maintenance department was busy. All the custodians do extra cleaning during the spring break time. So there were cleaning and repairs and walls being patched up and painted, and I just want to say congrats to all the hard work. I haven't had a chance to go out to the schools yet, but I will be touring the schools shortly, and look forward to looking at our schools. They are well maintained. I'm very proud to say that when I go and do my secretary treasurer's gathering, and I always like to brag about how well maintained our schools are. Another topic I wanted to bring to everyone's attention, this affects all non-teacher pension plans. So we have staff, union staff, like our secretaries, EAs, folks that are joined into our MSBA pension plan would have received notification in the month of March that the administrator for the plan has changed. We used to deal with ECLR. MSBA gathered a committee to prepare a request for a proposal early, or I should say in the fall of last year, I believe, and they did award Element, organization or a company, to administer the pension plan. So what that really means to the school divisions is we're just going to be completing documentation and submitting to a new administrator. What that means to any pension plan holders, should you be retiring and before the end of the school year, you want to put your paperwork in, you'll be submitting everything after April 1st to Element. Anything before that, it would have been to ECLR. Element is in the process of updating a website and getting better and new communication out. They've already did some new technology reports with payroll, and it's easier to use and update. So we're hoping that this is a great step in the right direction. I do think that there's going to be some bumps along the way. Folks that are looking at retiring sooner than later, they might see some delays, but Element is aware of some of the individuals that reached out to ECLR by the end of March, and they will try and help them transition into retirement. But we can also say that the pension itself has not changed. We're not, the plan is not changing from the type of defined contribution. It's the contribution is going to remain the same for all the employees that are enrolled in the pension. So I think that was a big discussion that took place just before spring break, as everybody was getting ready for spring break, and out came this memo from the school division. We also notified QP presidents to let them know that this was also happening. And if they have any questions, they can direct the questions out to finance and the payroll department, and we can try and help them.
Thanks, Jody. Any questions for Jody? Trustee Rowland?
It's regarding to your finance lip here. I think it was about prior to COVID that the board had approved a pilot project for credit cards to just several schools, and I see you have mentioned that purchasing has issued school credit cards. So what has gone on with that from the pilot project? Now every school has a credit card, or what have we got going on now?
Yeah, I was unaware that it was a pilot project. I also had questions at the board level at one of the purchasing presentations asking why wouldn't all the other schools have credit cards. So at this time, when reviewing the practices with the current credit cards that we had, it seemed there was adequate use. There was no concern that nobody else could have one. The internal controls and the current policies that we have seem to be effective, that everyone could have one. I don't know what the reason, if there was any further notice to the board to come back to issue more credit cards, but we do find that it was more efficient for folks when they are traveling or booking reservations to have their own credit card rather than going to the central divisional credit card. So there's some independence for the schools, and we found that was the biggest important thing for them.
Just to clarify, so every school in our division now has a credit card, and is it that has been issued to the principal, or who's in charge of that now?
Yeah, it's issued to the principal. They have to fill out the application to make sure that the background check as to the credit card application, but it's issued to the person, the principal, and it is recognized as a Sunrise School Division credit card.
So I guess my question then, Jody, is this is something that will be monitored with the finance committee on a monthly basis with regard to the use of the credit cards? Because my understanding was that we only had 2 schools that were using it. It was to go out to all schools. I think that Trustee Rowan is right. I think that it was at first let's figure it out how it was going working with the 2 schools. The idea was to get it out. It just didn't get out for a long time to schools. It's out there now. That's great, but obviously I'm just assuming, I'm just asking that this will be something that the finance committee will monitor.
I've never, in the 2 years that I've been here, it's never something that I've brought up to identify the purchases from the credit card. The actual process to use a credit card is very much like any other transaction. If you're going to buy something from Best Buy with a credit card, you're still going out and getting a purchase order. You're still going to go through those processes. So the same practices to actually purchase something, the same procedures are being followed. So there's no report that would identify that there are certain purchases, other than you'll see a transaction that's getting paid to Sonova, or I guess it'll be Access Credit Union. But when the person who is signing off on payments, you can see all the transactions that are occurring on the credit card. You will see that there were purchases to the various online vendors or a last-minute request because of a timing issue. So the internal policies, and I think that's the rationale behind issuing a credit card, we have fairly reasonable in procedures that don't tie up administration from using it, but still gives the division an internal control to make sure that it's still being used fair and accordingly. And there's still the side of, after it's reconciled, the signers, myself and whoever's signing off on the checks, can actually see how it's used and can identify if it's within reason as well.
Thank you. Anyone else? Trustee Rowan?
I have a question, and perhaps it's more something that would be geared towards the finance committee, but I'm going to ask it here, and if I have to get the answer at finance, that's fine too. I know that one of our schools that was on the pilot program had indicated a need for a greater credit limit as far as being able to book hotel rooms for sports teams, those types of things. Is that being addressed through this process?
So the issue with a credit card for a division is we're limited to the total balance of credit available to the school division. So by issuing all these credit cards to the schools, we can't increase one credit card without reducing another. So when somebody still wants to purchase, say, rooms on a hotel or make a larger purchase, we would still recommend that they would go and request if they could invoice us. So if there is also the divisional credit card that we can support them when making a big purchase. Schools that are still going to put purchases for flights, say they're going on a sports trip and they need 10 tickets for the airfare, the credit card won't have the limit. The divisional credit card will. So we can still support them that way. It's a few and far between situation that they will put something more on their card, more than their balance. If they are, we take a look and coach them to see which vendor that they should be reaching out to and seeing why they couldn't get an invoice. There's also times when we know this time of year between now and June, we'll know that they will be making more frequent purchases on their credit card. And sometimes we'll do a credit card advance where we'll put additional funds just in advance on the card. So it'll allow them, with the timing of the payments and versus when they're purchasing the item, there'll be room on the credit card. So I've talked to about 2 schools about their limits, and if they want a higher limit, we have to reduce somebody else's. and I'm sure we can figure out how better to utilize the card to meet their needs.
Anyone else? Thanks, Jody. We'll go to board business, 8.1, report card data. Who's got that? Okay.
So Jennifer Baker prepared a large slide deck that you would have had in your materials, and I just carried forward a previous report of Kathy's, which explains what you're looking at when you see the slide deck. I'll start with a brief apology. When I carried forward Kathy's report from previous years, I did not update the date in the top corner there, so we'll get that corrected and get Sarah to upload a fresh report so it accurately reflects the date of the meeting. But my assumption is that you've all seen this data before and you've seen this report before, so there's really nothing that I necessarily would need to interpret for you. It's something that you're familiar with. The only thing I would add is that when I did walk through the slides myself, the data does reflect what we would hope and expect, in terms of student growth. You can see from the bar graphs a shift from, the left to the right in terms of the volume of the bar graphs. And you'll also notice that in our earlier grades, we see bigger and more significant jumps, where we see more dramatic steps in learning, on a month-by-month basis. As we get into the middle years, you still see that left to right shift in terms of the data, but it's just not as dramatic, and that would be expected as the jumps in learning slow down as the students get a little bit older. So data as expected, nothing that we should be concerned about. We should be very encouraged by the work that's going on in our schools.
Any questions on report card data? So my question would be to Trevor, is there any one school where the report card, so we see it at a 50,000 foot level, and Kathy's always told us that you guys drill down. Is there any one or two schools where the report card data is concerning that somehow we should be looking at or looking to think to provide supports to because our report card data is a certain way?
Sure, that's a great question, Paul. At this time, I'll just say that I did not drill down on this data set, and so I haven't had the chance to look at it on a school-by-school basis. Certainly something I can do, and if there are any concerns, I can bring that back, to the board for sure.
Yeah, so I'm just going to use an example, and I'm going to pick on Hazel Ridge School. You know what? If all of a sudden we found out in Hazel Ridge School that students aren't doing so well in a certain area, part of it is then does the board think about, do we need to, and I would hopefully assume then that you're also coming back to us with saying, hey, we're not doing so well, we need to put some additional resources into this school to do those kind of things. So, and again, this is fictional, there's nothing about Hazel Ridge School, but since we don't see that information, I think that would be our role is that if there are some areas where we're lacking in certain areas, is there additional support that we need to find to go ahead and support? Okay. Anyone else report card data? Okay, we have monthly enrollment and there's information on monthly enrollment. Any questions on that? Okay. Hearing none, is that we have the calendar approval, and so there was a notice of motion last time, and I'll turn it over to you, Trev.
It's a notice of motion on this meeting, so we'll be voting to approve the calendar next meeting. Again, it's just the school calendar for the year. When we looked at it, we tried as best as we could to take into consideration the Lord Selkirk School Division and the River East Trans-Tahona School Division calendars to overlap days when students weren't in school to have as least amount of impact on transportation as we could. It didn't line up as well this year as in past years. Lord Selkirk School Division in particular did some different things with their school calendar this year, which they're allowed to do to meet their own needs, and we balance that off meeting the Sunrise needs in terms of what our schools and our families expected as well. As I said, the calendar information is all there for you to review, and it'll be motion next meeting.
Any key highlights that for this group, just for them to go over? Is there anything key if there's anything controversial?
No, I don't think there is. We've tried to stagger out the days as we have in the past, and so it's a pretty reflective calendar as it has been the last handful of school years.
So any questions for Trevor? Trustee Rowan.
I'm used to seeing the blue and the green on this calendar. Can you tell me what the purple is?
Without going back to check, I'm fairly certain that the purple is our colony PD or religious holidays, and so.
Okay, hearing no other questions. Thanks for that, Trevor. Grade 9 to 12 credit attainment data.
Yeah, this is my report. So it was scheduled to come on March 19th, but we needed to make sure that we had this right, because when you start to dig down into it, as you said, this is the 50,000 or 20,000 or how many thousand foot view that you want. This is one of the pieces of data that is super huge and important, and we want to drill down to, especially at the grade 9 level, because grade 9 credits on the first go through is one of the strongest indicators of success through high school and graduation. So these are places and spaces where we want to look at these numbers and say, okay, well, hang on a second, where is everybody? We want to take a look at what's possible to attain, and I wanted to speak to a couple of little highlight pieces. We have 10 block systems, and what that means is there's 5 possible sections in the first semester and 5 possible sections in the second semester at 2 of our schools, École Edward Schreyer School and at Springfield Collegiate. The reason you would see a 4 here partway through is not because I have done the math incorrectly, but because we have some courses that only count as 1 credit because they go all year long, or we have some courses that are offered half and half opposite one another. Some of our schools will timetable phys ed every other day so that kids are active every other day. They will schedule music all year long so that you're not getting music in the first semester and then not seeing anything again until the second half of grade 10. So in the first term or the first semester here, you'll see some of those numbers and go, well, hang on a second, how come it's not 5? And what's with these wacky numbers that kind of go along the way? When I take a look at this and can boil those numbers down and I look at the schools and where they're sitting, you'll see in the corner that it's fairly simple to click on the high schools that are there, and I get a chance to, and Trevor will get a chance to look at all of those data pieces. The schools look at it really intently, and when report cards are done in the first semester, they take a look at all of those courses and credits and say, where are students at and what are they getting and where are they sitting? There is nothing unremarkable here in terms of what we're seeing. In grade 10, again, you'll start to see the numbers go a little bit differently. You'll see that at École Edward Schreyer School, they have a full year of math that only counts for 1 credit, whereas Springfield Collegiate Institute has 2 different ones set up, so they'll start to see a different number in those. You can go through these, and it's tough to read from the 20,000 foot view because it looks like everybody's staggered all over the place, but I need to remind you that they should be staggered all over the place because we're looking at different possible targets at the schools. So no panic point when you look at this and go, why aren't they all in the same place? They're not going to be in the same place, and it's important to look at what do they have here. When we roll through then again to where our grade 12s are sitting at, here's the possible credits that they could have. I feel like that number is wrong for the grade 12s, and I need to change that one. Yep. This is where they're sitting at in grade 12 and looking at the number of students who have already enough credits to graduate. Puts us in really, really good stead because we still have students that are here in our buildings and who aren't graduating earlier. They're getting those credits and they're locking them in and they're still sticking around and getting more credits, and that's unintended to our credit because we have students who are working hard and getting a bunch of stuff done. So I wanted to just make sure that you had that look at things. When you have some of the students down here in the 3s and the 4s or the 7s or the 8s, the 2 reasons you would have someone with really, really low credits might be that they're on an individualized plan because they aren't doing regular academic work. Every now and then we can find a credit that they can earn, legitimately earn. Or it might also be that we have students who have just joined us and we haven't looked at their transcript yet and don't know what other credits they might be getting from somewhere. So just wanted to give you a quick look at the credit attainment from last time.
Questions from anyone? Trustee Rowan?
I have a question for you, Kathy. If we have a student that was reintegrating into the public school system from homeschooling, how would we factor in those credits as they go through high school?
So they would probably have a transition meeting, you know, as you're coming from homeschooling into high school. There would have to be some communication with the homeschool department because you report those credits each year with the homeschool department. And so typically our guidance counselor will communicate with the homeschooling department and the family, and we'll take a look at that and say, what can we grant? What have you accomplished? A school can ask someone to do, I'm going to say competency tests, but they can do some assessments to say, have you done this work, and can you, you know, show us your skill set in a certain subject before we say you've attained math, grade 10 math, or grade 11. It is important to know that if we have students who homeschool all the way to grade 12, they don't graduate with a diploma from there. So they do need to come back at some point if they're going to get a diploma, and that process of what credits are we giving and how do those match up with the compulsories is the important piece. If we have all the compulsories ticked off, we can then just say +4 more homeschool credits or +5 more if we need to, and we would like to focus on the compulsories.
Anyone else? Okay, thanks for the information, Kath. General funding, so the next 8.5 and 8.6. We did ask the group here to come back with us with two different things and for us to have a discussion about. One was about general fundraising and one was about school fees. So I think there's two separate things. So let's talk about, well, the first one is general fundraising. I'll turn it over to Trevor, and then let's have a conversation. Jeff?
So I think quite a bit of this conversation happened at the last meeting, just around general fundraising. If you've read through the report, and you know, I tried to summarize three of the most major themes in terms of how schools fundraise and distribute their funds. And I think it's the third one when we talk about general fundraising is really what we're looking at, where schools may you know, take on fundraising activities supporting an opportunity where funds are held by the school until they're needed. It's more geared towards a theme like a school trip or school activities where maybe the specific trip or activity isn't necessarily identified, but the school wants to have a reserve to support these things at the school level. You know, I think anytime when we talk about any fundraising whatsoever, it has the potential to place, you know, a financial or a participation hardship or expectation, you know, on students and families, and we want to make sure that, you know, we mitigate that as best as we can in making our fundraising optional, you know, for our students and our families. When we get down to the recommendation, you know, side of things, I think basically points 3, 4, and 5 were what Kathy had summarized for the group out of some conversation from last meeting, where we need to communicate that the fundraising is optional, funds are distributed to all the students who can potentially benefit, and the funds are used in the same year that they are raised. I added a bit of a caveat there for doing some fundraising for playgrounds. That's probably going over multiple years, and so I think everyone, you know, can understand and respect that. I added in the first 2 points, just for a bit more of a direction and control mechanism. I think anytime we take on a fundraising project, we should clearly identify what those funds are actually being used for. Maybe not in the terms of general fundraising, but being, you know, identifying the theme. Is it going to be reserved for field trips? Is it going to support the athletics program? We should be able to identify specifically what it's for, rather than just saying we want to create a reserve in case, you know, some needs pop up. The second control mechanism is all of our schools have their school funds, and the money should be deposited into the appropriate school fund account. Then, you know, when they take it out of that school fund account, our, you know, purchasing and finance team make sure that it's being spent in the consistent with the original desire to collect the funds.
Okay, so this is general fundraising discussion that let's go ahead now before we get into something else. Trustee Nichol.
Could we clarify number 5? When you say the same year, are you talking about calendar year or are you talking about school year?
My recollection of the conversation from last meeting, it would be within the same school year. So we raised the funds earlier in the year, and so they can be distributed, and students who are part of raising those funds can benefit.
Any other comments? How about if I go round table, because I think that people want to weigh in on this. Start with you, Diane.
It was actually also about number 5, with the exception of playgrounds, but maybe the wording could be like larger capital, because maybe they want to build something in a library or...
Capital project.
Yeah, maybe not just specific to playgrounds. But the rest looks fine, thanks.
Alicia, want to comment on any of this?
No, same as Diane, just capital projects.
Dawn, anything else? Melissa?
I'm good. I like changing the wording to capital projects, though, as it gives schools a little bit more flexibility with some of their major projects.
Trustee Boyton?
Yeah, no changes other than what's already been said.
Trustee Dent?
Yeah, agreed. I like Diane's recommendation there.
Trustee Harris? So I like this. I think this is really well put together. However, I don't want to raise any money until the roughly $500,000 that we have, that are in school funds. That's an awful lot of money. And so I think that you guys are talking about a plan, about talking to our school administrators, certainly about, which is great. But we need to make sure, and yes, I understand that people want to keep something for a project, and I have no problem with that, but not to the tune of the amount of money that we have there right now. And I like what you've listed here, with your team, Mr. Reed. So this is good, but until we, and I'm talking from when I went to the last finance meeting, the amount of money that we carried over in school funds to the amount of money that we have now, I'm looking at an awful lot of money. So I think this is great, but I also think that, Trev, you need to have a conversation with your school administrators and say, hey, you know what, there's an awful lot of money in those funds. Trustee Dent, I'll come back.
Maybe just to your point, Trustee Magnan, that should we develop a 0.6 where there's some sort of threshold of funds that would be accumulated, or do we want to be that specific? Like again, I can appreciate that, so much, if it's earmarked for a certain project, that's fantastic, but should we look at limiting a carryover?
If you're asking me, I think that we want to give flexibility here to this group around that, but I think that the message is clear. We've got, in our school funds account, we've got an awful lot of money, and I think that the message is clear, guys, you need to use your school funds, because at the end of the day, you're going to be asking to carry over some of those school funds, and this group of 8 is going to make a decision on those school funds. So I think that I hear you, Trustee Dent, but as of right now, for my thought process, is give them the opportunity, and let's see where we get to. Trustee Rowland?
Thanks. I like your idea, but I think it's sort of hard to manage for some projects going to be bigger than others. But just maybe one more wording thing. On number 1, when you said they should clearly identify, which absolutely they should, and I would maybe possibly add and submit to Secretary Treasurer or Finance Committee, like to have record of what that would be, that they would be, what project they would be working on, that they would do that fundraising, because it may be identified by our Secretary Treasurer as something that would be covered maybe within our own maintenance, or maybe not worthy of this finance. I don't know, but I think maybe just submit it so it is people are aware of it and outside of school.
That's good you put that. In my opinion, that goes without saying, is that if you're going to go ahead and have a project and you want to hold on to money, you want to build a playground and you need for 2 years to build up money, I have no problem about you holding that money and fundraising to go ahead and do that. But just to fundraise for the purpose of we just want to collect money, No, if there's a purpose, yeah, that's great that there's a purpose, let's go to it. But there always should be a plan, and I think that we've talked about that in the past, and you need to get permission to go ahead and carry money over any time. So good, but good point. Anyone else? Trustee Nichol?
I think at the end of the year, the school is supposed to be giving a report on the school funds, and they're supposed to tell us where they're spending the money, and I read the report, and everywhere they said they're going to spend the money, it seems good to me. Whether they follow through or not, I won't know until this next June, but last June I read that it was great detail, and I was satisfied with, because we'll say White Mount, they had, well, 20,000 in the grad committee. Well, they should have that 20,000 in the grad committee, because their philosophy is they always have 20, they came many years ago, they had 20,000, and they kept that 20,000. So they keep on raising money, but they never spend that 20,000. So you can't, now what do you do with that 20,000 now, other than they do spend it on scholarships and all that. They take the interest of the money for scholarships, so they still want that 20,000. They don't want to spend it, because if they spend it this year, they don't have any scholarship money for the following year. So as long as they come up with a plan, I'm happy with the plan.
Thanks, Trustee Nichol. Anyone else? Trustee Boyton?
I don't want to be in the position where we're telling our schools what they have to do with their fundraising. I thought we were just, wanted to be consistent, that, these are the boundaries, don't go out of them. But I don't want to, like, you got to come to us for this permission, you have to come to us. I don't want that kind of control. I just want a consistency across our division so that everybody's on the same level.
Anyone else? So I think you've got some kind of feeling as to where we are. I think the recommendations are there. Do you need anything else?
No, I just think, the closing comment would be a balance between, Diane's comment and Lorraine's comment, both well made. It's not something that we want to, overmanage, in the sense that, like I said in the report, it could be as simple as the silver collection at the school tea or the Christmas concert with a sign that says, funds are going to a specific group. Or it could be the 50-50 at the drama production, where it's announced we're selling 50-50 and, funds go to support the drama program. But at the same time, when we do have schools that are taking on large-scale chocolate sales or those types of things, we probably want them checking in to make sure if that's appropriate. So some sort of wording in there that maybe comments on the scope or the complexity or the involvedness of the fundraiser probably is important. And so,
are we good to move on? Oh, sorry, Trustee Smith.
Is this just so we're trying to avoid our schools going to the parents for money when they already have enough money that we gave them already? Is that what we're trying to avoid?
We asked these guys last meeting to come up with some guidelines around general fundraising, and we asked them to come around some guidelines around school fees, because of the fact that we thought that there was an awful lot of money that was still available in our schools. I think it came up also that we also heard that there were certain schools that were collecting school fees and others weren't, and the thought of the board was, hey, do you know what, we thought the idea that we weren't going to go ahead and charge school fees. And that some people were feeling, well, you don't have to go ahead and do fundraising, but do you know what, you do have to, are you going to go ahead and donate to us? And they felt the pressure of that. So we asked these guys to come up with a plan. They've given us a plan around general fundraising, and now they're going to give us a conversation around school fees. But that's what we asked them to come up with last time that we got together. Fair enough with everybody here? No? Okay. So that's really with general fundraising, and there was those steps there with regard to the belief of where we are with general fundraising. Okay? So here's the school fees.
So I think we got through the lesser of the complicated of the two, and this one's going to take a little bit more conversation. And I did have a bit of a pre-conversation with Paul in terms of how, far he wanted to lead the discussion this evening, or if, the trustees wanted some think time on some of these points and coming back, next meeting for the discussion. So I'll leave that with Paul. But the board has, previously engaged, on the topic of school fees and student fees a number of times, and I kind of gave a little bit of a history there, and some of that history is also included on the agenda there. But I really do believe that other than taking an all-in or an all-out stance of completely prohibiting school fees, or just giving schools the ability to charge fees, it's going to be complicated, and it's going to be difficult to come up with something. It won't be impossible, and it is 100% worth the conversation, but it's going to be a challenge because there are so many different ways to look at this, and so many different things that can be considered, fees. And is it a fee to participate? Is it a cost because the student is actually buying something, or is it more of a registration to participate? And so I think through your previous conversations, you've probably identified things that you were comfortable with, schools asking families for, and I'm sure you have identified things that you weren't really supportive of, in a desire to minimize expenses to families and parents. I'm sure both of those, have been present in the past. But at the end of the day, I think our most important thing is, regardless of the fees that we land on or the procedure that we land on, is that schools get a very, very clear message that fees do not exclude students from participating in any activity, whether it's curricular or extracurricular. And so schools want to charge fees, they're going to have to mitigate those fees for students and families that may find them prohibited. So if I could go back on the recommendation, I would have on the report, I would have chosen a different title than recommendations, because those 9 bullets aren't recommendations. I think those 9 bullets, or the 9 points there, are probably the starting point for the conversation for the board. I do believe that at some level school fees are appropriate. I don't think we're going to get away from them. We're going to end up denying students opportunities if we completely eliminate fees, but I think we need to be very cautious in terms of how we use them. So I won't walk through all of 9 points there, one by one. They're there, you can ask questions, but right off the bat, I'm not looking for more to do, but one idea might be just to say, schools can charge fees with the superintendent, and we've got a single gate, in terms of that consistency piece, right? That's one thing to consider. Maybe it's a good idea, maybe it's not. I think, we also have to relate the charging of school fees to existing school budgets, whether that be school funds or our SBDM dollars, and how our schools are allocating those. I think points, 5 and 6, a couple of opportunities where fees are, probably, probably appropriate. We often have, students in a specific class where the class is doing a specific assignment, either in art or shops, and a student says, hey, I'd like to, add this to mine, or I'd like to go above and beyond, and there's a specific cost associated with that when the student is, taking a table or a chair or something home that's above and beyond what the rest of the class is, doing. And even for extracurricular, I can think of examples of games clubs, especially like the card clubs, Magic, the game that our students are doing, where, a teacher will go out of pocket and, put together a card deck, which is required for students to play the game, and students want to take those home. And, there might be a $5 or $10 fee for, students' card deck that they then take with them so they can play the game out of class as well, right? So there are appropriate fees. I think we need to define a student fee versus a registration fee, because we charge our football players and our hockey players a registration fee that they would otherwise see to play those sports in the community, and I don't think we're going to eliminate those. And most importantly, I think we just need to really be clear with families, if we're charging a fee, what is the breakdown? What are the students actually going to benefit from that fee? If we say that there's a fee to participate in something for $40, well, why is it $40? and you know, what is it there? I don't think that's too much to ask of our schools. So those are, I think, you know, what I feel are some of the most important parts to begin the conversation on, you know, fees. So, you know, open to questions, or turn it back over to you, Paul, to lead the discussion.
So I think this is a good one. You know, you've got 9 recommendations that are there. People have had a chance to read them. I guess some of your thoughts, what you like, what you don't like, I'd love to hear them. Because I have my own opinions, just like everyone else around this table, but let's, who would like to, anyone want to jump in? So how about if we do this? How about if we talk for about, you know, 10, 15 minutes and see where we get to? Floor is open. Anyone? Okay, I'll start. Go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify before we start the discussion that there was actually only 3 schools that did charge beginning of the year type of student fees. Is that correct? I think it was 3. And I thought that was important to know, because I think that was a big component of what our final decision would be, that all schools follow along. But I think only 3 schools did charge what they called school fee at the beginning.
I think that there were, I don't know the exact number, but there were 2 or 3 schools that were doing it, yes. I don't know the exact number, they can find that, but yes, there were a few schools. We'll get that exact number in a minute.
I just think part of this is we want equalization and equal treatment for schools, for students, and it's an important part to note that some schools are doing things differently. But I welcome your opinion first, and we can work off of that, I'm sure.
I think that there's got to be a charge for some things. And you know what, I think though that if we're going on a school field trip to the museum, that, you know what, there's no cost to that. We need to figure out, find within as to that cost. I think though that if I'm going with a club after school and I'm going to somewhere else, yeah, there's probably could be a fee to that. I'm going to talk about high school hockey. So yes, we charge kids and there's a fee to play high school hockey. However, there's not a fee to play basketball. And there's not a fee to play volleyball. Now, does the school division pay into a fund that when we run our own, when we do things internally, there's a cost to it? Yes. But to think that they can pay for football and pay for hockey and pay for all those costs, no, that's not. But it's interesting that a kid that wants to play on our school basketball team doesn't pay anything, but a kid that wants to play on our school hockey team has to pay. But again, so there's a start to the conversation that I want to poke the bear with as to where it is. I think there are some good guidelines that are coming down here. I think that Kathy's always talked about for us in the past, if it's school related, there really shouldn't be any fees. School related is in curricular related, you know, that kind of stuff. But you want to go to there's a club that's going to first word came into my New York City, then yeah, I believe there needs to be a cost and people need to go ahead and pay for it. The other thing is, I think that no matter what, a band instrument, you know, somebody has to pay for a band instrument. Well, that's a curricular thing. Should they have to go ahead and pay? Great conversation. Do I want to make sure that there's no kid that says I can't go to band because I can't go ahead and rent a trumpet because I can't do that? Well, that's a problem for me, would be. And so there's some great conversations to go ahead and have. I'll leave it at that. Who else wants to jump in? Trustee Boyton.
Some of this has to be reasonableness, though, too. You know, a hockey club, well, we don't even have hockey rinks on our school property, so you have to rent ice. You know, we have gyms that kids can go and play basketball. So there's that, you know, there's that cost, that extra cost. So you know, kids want to curl. Well, we don't have curling rinks on our property, so we have to rent the curling rink. You know, so there's different reasonable things that, yeah, if you want to play it, it's extra. It's something that we can't accommodate in our buildings. So of course there should be a charge. So, we have to be reasonable also as to what we're charging fees for. And I do agree that, school startup fees, before the school even starts, there's a fee. Those I'm not in favor of. As things come along and, kids want to start up groups and they want to be a part of something that there is an extra cost, then I can see, that we should be charging some fees for that if we want to create those clubs or whatever.
Who else? Go ahead, Trustee Nicol.
Well, I like these 9 recommendations, or is that 10? Let's see. 9. I like those 9 recommendations. To me, they're flexible, and that sometimes for school fees, I think, going to be flexible. And it does say that, one I like, it says, fees may be appropriate when students participating in a club activity that has identified cost. So if you're on a club and you're not getting marked for it, it's not part of the curriculum, well, of course you should pay a fee, like hockey. But badminton is different because it's usually badminton is during school time. But anyway, I like these 9 recommendations.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Trustee Rowan.
I was waiting for another person, but so I agree with all these things too, and I think that is a reasonable test, and that would be applied in all these situations about curricular or non-curricular. But I think what has been kind of coming up or whatever that sits uncomfortably is those start of year fees that are sort of not assigned, they're just assigned to general activities, and just to, not to throw a school under a bus, but $50 at the start of the year for general activities that are not described yet. We've actually gone ahead as a board and increased our school-based decision by 15% for next year. So I feel like if there is some activity that the school would like to have, like a gym day outside or a hot dog day or something that would normally have gone to the school fees for, let's say, which are all great things, I think that we've provided an opportunity for them to find that money elsewhere now in their own school-based decision. And those fees, they can be a little bit overwhelming. When you start the school year, you have many other expenses with school clothing and other groups that parents are paying for, and that's what we were thinking as a board, is those fees were an additional burden that didn't need to be. And so I guess in this whole discussion, my hope would be that the schools do not have those start of year fees, find the money within their school-based, with the new monies that are coming to them, and remove that part. The rest I completely agree with as the recommendations.
Thanks, Pam. Anyone else? I don't like locker fees. Why are we charging somebody for a locker? Some schools do. And, yes, our locks get broken and those kind of things, but our schools have money. Unfortunately, our schools have money, and I just think that it's a cash grab. And by, again, looking at our school budgets and looking at our school funds, we have a lot of money. So I don't know if all schools charge a locker fee. I happen to be a principal of a school that charged a locker fee a number of years ago, and I thought that it was a great idea because we generated revenue. Do I think that it's a good idea now because I'm sitting differently looking at something? No. So if we have those kind of things, I don't particularly like them. I think that you talked about it, Lorraine, is that fees, in the beginning of the year just to start. You know what? Schools have money. Until things change, there's lots of money that are in schools. And we did give more money to schools in site-based decision making. It wasn't thousands of dollars, but there's more money. But I'm not so sure that we need to, unless somebody would come to us and say, hey, we don't have the money available to do some kind of a hot dog day or something, and I would say, I don't agree with that because we're looking at what kind of money's in their schools. Trustee Nicol?
You just want some clarification. What do you mean by locker fees? For the locker or for the locker or for the lock? So there's a difference because Whitemouth has always charged fees for the lock, but they get it's not a moneymaker because you get the money back at the end of the year. You get the lock back, you get the money back at the end of the year. Except Whitemouth got a little bit smarter later on. You pay for the lock at grade 9 and you keep it until grade 12 and you get the money when you finish grade 12. Before they used to give it every year and then they found out that was a waste of time. But it was for the lock, not for the locker.
Yeah, so I know a school one time that probably did that they collected fees in grade 9 and then said they would give them back in grade 12. I don't think there wasn't a whole amount of much money going back in grade 12. Lots of kids have, depending on your school, lots of kids in and out of your building. You know what, so it happens in some schools, great. I'm not sure it happens in all schools. Anyone else? Trustee Smith.
I just noticed that the early years still did the school supplies last year. They just did that on their own?
So I think, go ahead. So I don't know the specifics of the earlier school and what exactly was going on with that last year, but I can say in general, for many years we in Powerview provided parents with the option of school supplies as a matter of convenience to families. And so we would, traditionally send out a supply list that, may have had $50 to $75 worth of supplies on it, may have required a vehicle trip out of our small community to a larger center, or offer the parents the option of, a $30 fee where we could get all the supplies on the list for the student. Save them the travel, save them the shopping, and we, through our bulk buying, to our purchasing department, could actually get the supplies cheaper. So for years and years at Powerview School, we offered that as an option or a convenience to families, and the overwhelming majority of, families took us up on that. And so.
Is there any way we could offer that? Anyone interested in possibly offering that again? Because I know I spend $500 every year on my kids' school supplies, and it's way cheaper to do it that way.
Come to school in Powerview. No, good point. Good point. Trustee Dent.
Thank you. I really appreciate the kind of dialogue that's been going around, floating around. So it's given me a few thinking points to take home with me. But I just wanted to maybe state for ratepayers that are listening, because we talked a little bit about, wow, we've increased the school-based decision-making dollars, and it's true for the schools, but it just, I hope that people aren't thinking that schools are just sitting on this money either. Those funds are being used to enrich programming. They are being used for field trips and stuff like that. So if people were getting the notion that schools are really wealthy and they're sitting on this big, bank of money and looking at ways to cutting programming so that they have a good nest egg, that's not happening. So I felt the need to say that. And kind of as I was looking through the course-specific school fees, I was kind of thinking to myself, the first aid certificate fees, you have the food handler certificate fees, I was going to throw the home alone course, things like that. I think it'd be really cool if some of our bigger schools that have that flexibility could kind of train the trainer, if that's a possibility with some of these things, where we could look at flexing times, because I see these as some essentials. When we're talking about first aid, we're talking about saving people's lives. I think it'd be kind of a cool thing to, if we've had a couple of certified instructors within our own faculty that we can kind of move around to be able to teach that skill. I don't know if that's a possibility or not. Home alone courses, I know that that's something that the RMs offer at 11 years old. We have a big rural area, so I think the reality is legally or not, a lot of our kids are probably home on their own. So if we provided that skill for them so that they can be as safe as possible when they're at 11, which is the legal age, I think that would be great. So those were just some of my thoughts, but there's other thinking points too that I just need to digest a little bit further.
Anyone else? Trustee Harris?
I'm still trying to get my head wrapped around all of this stuff. I was hoping it would be a one-liner with 6 words in it that simplified everything. with school fees, and it's not possible. I'd like to clarify one thing, though. Trustee Rowland said that our SPDM went up by 15% in this budget. I was the one that recommended an increase, and I think it was 3.4%, not 15. So there's still an increase there. I think schools should be able to use some of that towards some of these fees. I still think it's a very complicated pot of stuff that's going on, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around this report and the other reports we've seen in the past.
So I said that we would talk about it for about 10-15 minutes. We have. I think that that's probably good information. We will come back, or we're going to ask these guys to come back, and we're going to put a motion together, certainly for this, so that people are very clear. And then it's very clear that as we go out to the schools, they have that information. So thanks for going ahead and doing that, and thanks for the discussion. Let's go on to 8.7 5-year capital plan. That's you, Jody.
I'm going to pull it up on the screen right away. I just have all the attachments open and I can't find the one I need. I just want to say those last couple of reports, very detailed, lots of information there, and I appreciate all the hard work that staff have put into that. All right, we're going to pull up the capital report. So on the list here is the summary of 1 to 12. So we have recommended 12 projects. I didn't put a motion forward because I thought potentially tonight we might do some discussion and then a motion would come forward next meeting in support of the identified projects. So on the list, heavy discussion for the last year, I would say, lots of good discussion about the Oakbank Dugald potential new school for a French immersion education site or a vocational program. So that's number one on the list based on the ad hoc land planning recommendation and motion that was passed. The other items, Anola and Centennial, we're seeing a lot of need for an upgraded HVAC system. In addition, when you upgrade your HVAC system, you also, the province is now including air conditioning. So we're finding between Anola and Centennial, during the warming period, the current system that exists in Anola is struggling to keep up. And we've tried to maintain the existing by putting in temporary cooling systems, but at this time it's not meeting the needs of the school. But we also see that the HVAC system does have to get an upgrade. So we put both Anola and Centennial at item 2 and 3. Beausejour early years is another area where we have to improve our building controls for the building itself. They have aged. Even though Beausejour early years is one of the newer schools, it's just over 20 years old, the actual components are aged out and they're no longer available. We've had to basically beg and borrow and put things together. So we've identified that with the province. They know that the system is aged out, and we want to get ahead of it. If there's a huge component that goes down, we want to make sure that we're ready for it and that we know where other parts are available, and we want to bring it to the attention of the province should something emergent come up. Whitemouth, again, we have been on the list last year. We are requesting to replace the steam boiler and convert it to a hot water system. Ecole Powerview, there's welding shops and woodworking dust collection systems. So again, it's improving ventilation, improving a dust collection system there. Oakbank Elementary, the exterior wall, the older section, we're looking at getting that updated. That also helps with maintaining energy efficiency. Usually when an upgrade takes place, there's improved insulation, so hopefully that will support lower energy costs. Hazel Ridge, a life skills room. It's been a request from the school, and we recognize there is a potential for a need for a life skills room. Springfield Middle School, we're looking at upgrading ventilation in the industrial woods area. Again, that's to make sure that we're meeting all the codes and have improved ventilation system in that area. Whitemouth, another component to an upgraded steam boiler, we're looking at upgrading the heating and cooling units. They are aged out again, and we want to maintain that and keep that up to date. Edward Schreyer School, looking at updating a science lab. We've put requests over the years of science labs, and Edward Schreyer School is one that is on the list now. And Ecole Powerview School is looking at improving science lab as well. So those are the recommendations. If you guys have any questions or any further comments.
Any questions for Jody?
Sorry, Jody. Ecole Powerview, don't they have a science lab?
They do, but we're looking at just renewing, and they have two. But one of the older ones, the school division, about 20 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, the school division actually maintained and upgraded the cabinets and the room. But we're getting to the point where some of that is needing to be replaced. So that's the one specific classroom, room 46, is on the list.
You didn't want to have Power School get a number 12. Okay, anyone else? So what you're telling us, Jody, is next meeting we're building a motion on this?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll bring forward the motion. I was just thinking if anybody had any further clarification or further additions.
This is obviously what you've sat down with Derek, and Derek has brought forward to you to go ahead and do that? Okay. There's no more lifts going into Hazelwood School? Okay. All right, anyone else? Okay, thanks very much, Jody. Nice work. We have the subdivision. Yep.
Mic on? Okay, the subdivision is a bit of a last, we added it late onto the agenda. Reading the notice from the province, we had to have the letter submitted before next week. So I wanted to bring it to the attention of the board. There's a subdivision along Broken Head River where the River's Edge Golf Course is in the RM of Broken Head. So they're trying to convert it from ag into rural residential. So there's a number of units or single lots that are going in there. They did bring the proposal forward last year, about June. It was, I believe it was, I don't have the proper term, but declined by either the province or the RM of Broken Head, and now it's come back as a revision. So now I'm submitting and letting them know that in the design that they should be considering adequate sidewalks and allowing our students to have adequate space for waiting for a bus. So that is one request, as well as the 10% property development fee that we're going to ask again. We've had discussions with the RM in Broken Head. We'll remind them with this letter that this is a fee for this area. And again, it's rural residential, so this could be families moving there, or it could be folks that want to live by the river and may not have children. But if there is development in this area, we may be sending out a school bus to the area for students to attend at Beausejour Early Years or Edward Schreyer School. So those are things that we want to keep on their radar.
Any questions? I might have a hard time supporting this because this could be in danger when, you know, Trustee Harris and Trustee Roll in golf there, because the balls could be flying in that area. So that's dangerous when they're golfing. So it might come up as a problem. So we'll see where we get to.
So the design, like, it's a whole new subdivision of lots. So they're putting in a new road. No.
They're putting it by the 4th tee where Trustee Rowland likes going there all the time, so. Yeah. I do. All right, thanks very much. Thanks very much, Jody. Signing authority. So be it resolved that the board approve the finance manager, Matthew Bialik, as one of the Sunrise School Division signing authorities. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Trustee Smith. Seconded by Trustee Rowan. Any questions to this? Okay, hearing none, we'll vote. Passed 8-0. Welcome aboard, Matthew Bialik. We also have Edward Shire field trip. So be it resolved, the board approve in principle the Edward Shire School field trip to Quebec City and Montreal, May 2025, subject to the superintendent's final approval. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Trustee Harris, seconded by Trustee Roland. Any questions to this? Hearing none, we'll vote. Passed 8-0, thank you. Ecole Duggold trip to Camp Morden from June 12th to June 14th, 2024. Be it resolved, the board approve in principle the Ecole Duggold school field trip to Camp Morden, June 12th to 14th, 24, subject to the superintendent's final approval. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Trustee Rowland, seconded by Trustee Dent. Any questions? Hearing none, we'll vote. Trustee Harris is reminding me, making sure that I'm looking left and right all the time, so I'll stay on that. Where are we? So I had a late one come in. Obviously, we can't do that, but so I'm sitting this afternoon with the town councillor. The town councillor said, "Can you get something on our agenda tonight so that I can use something in the summer?" No, I don't think I can, but you know what? Just put it in the proper channel so it'll work. Committee reports. Policy Committee. Trustee Nicol, Trustee...
Nothing to report.
Finance Chair. Trustee Boyson.
I just want to mention that since none of the trustees on the Finance Committee are accountants, there's usually lots of questions that we fire at Jody, and I just want to thank Jody for her patience. You usually are able to answer questions immediately, and if we don't get the answer that night, usually there's an email waiting for us the next day. So just thank you for that. We really appreciate it because you get fired up with a lot of questions. And since our last meeting, Matt Bialik did join the finance team on March the 20th. So as the new finance manager, we welcome him. I noticed that Jody looks a little more relaxed now, a little less tired. So that's a good sign. Other than that, minutes are in the packages, and our next finance meeting is April the 18th.
Any questions on the minutes that Trustee Boyson can answer for anyone? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on. So the check register. So be it resolved that the board received the February 24, 2024 check register, a total amount of checks issued at $1,655,443.19, reviewed on March 18th by the Finance Committee for information as submitted. Moved by Trustee Boyson, seconded by Trustee Rowan. Any comments to that? Hearing none, we'll vote. Sarah, I have a hard time saying it. You probably have a hard time hearing it. I guess some of you got kicked out. There's 4 of you that need to vote. All right, so past 8-0. We were just trying to catch them. Thanks, Sarah, for doing that. Perfect. Education Foundation Committee, we have a meeting, I think, tomorrow, right? Tomorrow afternoon, so we'll have some information from there. Professional development, so we have a couple of you going to CSBA. The Divisional Financial Summary Report, it's there. Any questions to it? And Jody, did you want to talk anything to it?
I think the report kind of says everything in there, talks about our deficit. So I think if anybody has any questions, they can ask me here or even later on.
Are we good? Okay, let's keep going. So we have lots of nice to know information. Thanks for putting that into Sarah for all that information. We don't have any board correspondence that's there. We have upcoming meetings, the 16th of April and May 7th. There are some press releases that are there. This 14, Jody, do we have any questions from the public?
No, we don't.
We do not have to go into in-camera, so we're adjourned, are we not? And so, you know what, your first meeting is over, Mr. Reed. Good job. Nice work. All right, so we're adjourned. Thanks very much.